Hello friends and patrons, Rob Caskie, proudly telling stories, as you now well know. I was fortunate enough when I was at university, studying agriculture at the University of Natal in Pietermaritzburg, to work as a border master at the wonderful school of Merkeston, a traditional feeder school for the great Maritzburg College. And young boys, as you know, as I loved as a kid, love hearing stories. And one of the favorite books that they used to love stories from is this book. It really is part of South African folklore, called Memories of a Game Ranger by the great Harry Wolhuter. And one of the greatest chapters in this story revolves around the lion attack, where he was attacked by two lions whilst riding his horse in the Kruger National Park in 1903. And whenever the boys were given the option of a freelance or ad-lib story from me, they invariably would go back to Wolhuter and the story of the knife. Well, you may know, those of you who know me well, that I ended up working after university in Botswana as a photographic safari guide, and then I went on to work for Tim Liversidge, doing wildlife documentaries for National Geographic. It was a quite magical time of my life. We did a lot of walking, boating, traveling in the Okavango Delta, built a camp for filming purposes. It was incredible. And whilst I was there walking around, you would often find pieces of ivory that had broken off tusks, largely as a result of elephants either fighting or trying to uproot trees and so forth, and often the tusks break. Now, with the ban on ivory and so forth, it's very difficult to move ivory, and I was lucky enough to bring some ivory back from Botswana down to South Africa, tucked away inside the spare wheel of my little Renault 4, which I owned at the time as my motor vehicle. And I tucked this ivory away in the spare wheel, put the wheel back onto the rim, and brought it down to South Africa. And then I was lucky enough to meet a wonderful man called Ken Smythe, who's a professional knife maker out at Swartberg near Kokstad. And Ken Smythe made me this most beautiful of knives. And in payment, he took the remainder of the ivory. He used some of it for the handle of this beautiful knife, and took the remainder of that ivory as payment for his exquisite skill in making this most beautiful of knives. And then I've got a great friend of mine called Dave Lincoln, who I used to work with in Botswana, to make this sheath for the knife. Now, this sheath is made of elephant hide. It is absolutely exquisitely crafted. Dave Lincoln does the most incredible work of Lincoln leather here locally in Hilton, and this knife fits like a glove inside of this sheath to be worn on a belt. More about this perhaps at another time. The real focus of my story today is that I wanted, for authenticity of my story, when I talk about Harry Wolhuter killing the lion with a knife in 1903, to have a replica knife built to the exact shape, size and specifications of Wolhuter's original knife, a sheath and a belt. And herein lies the rub, because the original knife, a pipe brand knife made in London, considered one of the great knife brands at the time, you recall Harry had swapped it off a cheese board with his own knife, which was really a pirate brand and a copy of a pipe brand knife, whilst at a trading store near Leidenburg one day. And that knife fitted quite loosely into the sheath. He had a sheath made of an impala hock. That's the skin from the lower front leg of an impala. And the knife fitted quite loosely in the sheath, which was an issue. He was afraid that the knife had fallen out of the sheath when he was bucked off his horse. Thank heavens it hadn't. So I engaged the services of a local knife maker called Murray Roberts. You can message me with pleasure if you'd like the details of this extraordinary knife maker and ironsmith here in the Howick area. And Murray Roberts was kind enough to make me a knife, the exact replica and specifications of Wolhuter's original knife. So here is the knife itself, with a beautiful, beautiful Mopani hardwood handle. But this is the shape and size of the knife that Wolhuter was able to kill the lion with in 1903. It's a quite extraordinary story, considering that he was stabbing the lion backhanded with his weak left hand whilst being dragged by the lion by the right shoulder. and Murray at the same time made this beautiful sheath for this knife. This sheath is quite different to Wolhuter's original sheath for reasons I explained. Murray Roberts got Impala hock and made a sheath for the knife, but felt that it wasn't quite deep enough, and there was the constant risk of the knife falling out and being lost, which indeed was an issue that Wolhuter had with the original sheath. So I have now this beautiful leather sheath for this replica Wolhuter knife, which was one of my prized possessions. Now onto the story of the belt. Because Wolhuter at the time was wearing a belt that is very, very similar to the Girl Guides and the Boy Cubs belt that looks just like this. And in the leather belt, it has two beautiful rings, and it has a buckle where one side of the buckle slides through the other side of the buckle and then locks. Now this Girl Guide belt belonged to Karen. She was a Girl Guide probably more than 50 years ago, and the fact that we still have this belt is magnificent. And Karen offered for me to take this belt apart to have a replica belt made in the style of Wolhuter's. I couldn't bring myself to take this belt apart. The belt, you recall, played an integral part of the story, because Wolhuter, when he climbed into the tree, was so sure he was going to collapse from pain and shock and loss of blood that he'd faint and fall out of the tree. So he undid his belt and secured himself by means of the belt around a branch in the tree to hold him into the tree. So the belt is an integral part of the story and to Wolhuter's savior. Now, I was lucky enough quite recently to be given by Harry Wolhuter's grandson, a man called Mike Wolhuter, who lives in Hilton, a beautiful Wolhuter buckle. So this is the Wolhuter buckle. He had them specially printed and pressed for his family, and I believe that I'm one of the very few outside of the direct Wolhuter family to be given one of these most magnificent brass buckles. I was not, however, completely happy with the size and the thickness, particularly of the belt that came with this buckle. So I asked my friend Dave Lincoln, who I've already mentioned, who made the elephant hide sheath for my beautiful Ken Smythe knife, whether we couldn't try to make something closer to the original Wolhuter belt using this buckle. So Dave Lincoln, who is a master craftsman and the most incredible leather worker, approached Woodward's in Cape Town for these beautiful brass rings, like the original rings within the belt used by Wolhuter. He included my new and original Wolhuter buckle, and here we have a belt now, which I'm going to be using in conjunction with the sheath and the knife for my Wolhuter talks. So although this belt is not officially all that identical to the original belt worn by Wolhuter, which was far more like a Girl Guide or a Boy Scout belt, this belt is absolutely beautiful. And I'm looking forward to telling the story about Wolhuter using this belt, the sheath and the knife, beautifully created and crafted by Murray Roberts. He's put his name and emblem on one side of the blade and my name on the other side of the blade. And this is partly why I love this vocation and telling these stories so much, because out of a story like that about Wolhuter comes a story I've just shared about the recreation of these products to closely match the originals. Derek McCaskill is running a huge mountain bike event through the Kruger Park later this year called the Migration. One of their campsites is very close to the spot where Wolhuter was attacked by the lion in 1903. I've already sent details of these products and of my background to Derek McCaskill, who knows me well, and I'm hoping that I'll be invited up to share with those mountain bikers the story of Harry Wolhuter, that fateful night in August 1903, using the knife, the sheath, and this belt. What a treat for mountain bikers from all over the world to be coming to ride on their mountain bikes through the Kruger National Park, probably in the same league and adventure status as the magnificent Tour de Tuli, which is hosted every year between Botswana, southwestern Zimbabwe, and Mapungubwe, game reserve on the extreme north of South Africa, where we cross the Shashi River, cross the Limpopo River, go through these border posts and so forth, and ride through this big game area. Well, we're hoping to be riding in the daytime that we don't have a problem with a lion and end up in the jaws of a lion and have to extract ourselves the way Harry Wolhuter did that night with his backhanded blow, with his left hand, with his famous pipe brand knife, because generally on the mountain bikes, we don't have any of this sort of equipment with us. I hope you've enjoyed that little story. Thank you so much.